So welcome to India Top Doctor, sir. As you
Yeah,
know, today we'll be talking about neurophysiology and yoga. So before we
yes.
move ahead, can you tell us what is neurophysiology?
Um, Neurophysiology, anything concerned with the physiology and the brain, we want to call it as neurophysiology. And anything to come with pathology, we call it neuropathology. Anything to do with the chemistry, we call it as neurochemistry. Anything to do with the endocrine, we call it neuroendocrinology. The brain actually developed from 1990 to 2000, which was called the year where the brain, decade of the brain, and hence neurophysiology. In terms of simple statement, anatomy is the basis of medicine, and physiology is, of course, the principle of medicine. And biochemistry is the life of medicine. So neurophysiology is going to be the order of the day in the years to come.
All right, sir. And how does
Yeah.
yoga affect the physiology of the body?
In simple terms, the yoga, literally one has to look into the different aspects of the function of the brain and the physiology, where you are able to really do it very well with regard to the strengthening the social attachments, reduce the stress, reduce the anxiety, reduce the depression, reduce the anxiety, that yoga will develop fully in that individual. He can have a good control. Researchers are starting now to claim some success in using yoga and yoga-based treatment to help even active duty military and veterans also. So in other words, the entire human functions can be controlled by the yoga, given as a positive aspect.
All right, sir. And what are
Yeah.
the effects of yoga on the nervous system, if you can tell us about that?
See, the yoga and the nervous system, when you look at it, the yoga itself, it is actually 3,000 years old. It is the holistic approach to health and classified in the National Institute of Bethesda is an alternative medicine. The word yoga comes from the word Sanskrit, the root yuj, which means the union or yoke to join and to direct and concentrate one attention. Regular practices of yoga promotes strength, endurance, flexibility, facilitates characteristics, friendliness, like compassion and greater self-control, while cultivating a sense of calmness and well-being. Sustain the portions of human system. The four basic principles underlie the teachings of the practice of yoga in the healing system. The first principle is the body is a holistic entity comprised of various interrelated, what we can call it, dimensions, inseparable from one another. The second principle is the individuals and their needs are unique and therefore must be approached in a way that acknowledges this individuality, and their practice must be tailored accordingly. This is slightly in variance with the English system of allopathy, where we always talk about the evidence-based medicine, expert-based medicine, and experience-based medicine, decided on the double-blind crossover study. But here, you can't just apply that. And the third principle of yoga, which is a self-powering greatness, and the most important is that is going to be the life. And the fourth is application of the whole process. But when you look at the yoga per se in daily life, the nadi, which is consists of energy channels and transmitters, and the nadi are extremely energy channels, through which prana, the divine energy, life and consciousness streams. With the body, human body, there is a subtle and perfect network of 72,000 nadis that distribute this life force throughout the whole body. On the physical side, the nadis correspond to the nervous system. This is the most important point one should understand. This nadis, 72,000 are connected to the nervous system, but their influence extends beyond this to the both astral and spiritual. That becomes slightly psychological and existence. If all the nadis are functioning correctly, then we are healthy and generally feel happy. But nearly every one of us has come with physical and psychic problems in our day-to-day society, which means that some of the nadis are not working properly, and then the balance is absolutely needed. So when you look at the yoga, the first thing that comes to, because everybody is afraid of the heart and not of the brain. So they say, my heart is good because the death occurs in seconds. Brain is a slow death. It as yoga practice leads to decrease in the heart rate and blood pressure. This is something fantastic for an age when everybody gets a blood pressure, which is a very simple formula, I say in those days. 120 plus age by 2, upper limit is 150, and the lower blood pressure should be less than 90 in elderly people above the age of 50. But one thing that should be sure, that if a person has a diabetic, then the blood pressure should be around 135 to 85. And hence, the first thing that the yoga does is able to release the heart rate and the blood pressure by just doing this. And a yoga training for 1 year itself is more than sufficient for us to significantly decrease in the oxygen consumption, and then the heart rate and diastolic pressure also reduced. And hence, number one, it's used in the heart. Number two, the yoga clearly improves the cardiorespiratory efficiency. Madan Mohan et al. Have reported that the yoga training for 6 weeks duration attenuates the sweating response to step set and then produces a marked increase in respiratory pressure and endurance in 40 millimeters of mercury test in both male and female. So you can just see the respiratory efficiency in these patients. What about the yoga and the exercise? It is being reported very clearly, yoga training results in significant improvement in the cardiovascular endurance and the anaerobic threshold. This is consistent with the findings of Muralidharan and Ranganathan, who reported that the improvement in cardiac recovery index after 10 weeks of yoga training program as indicated by the Harvard step set. In other words, they have proved physiologically also that the yoga improves their exercise tolerance. Yoga also really balances the autonomic nervous system, consisting of the two limbs, namely sympathetic and parasympathetic. Although individual asana and the pranayam practices very selectively affect sympathetic and parasympathetic system, the overall effect of yoga practice is to bring a state of parasympathetic dominance, and Vempati and Talas assess the yoga-based guided relaxation on autonomic variables and found that the power of the low frequency component heart rate variability spectrum reduced, whereas the power of high frequency component increased, suggesting that a reduced sympathetic activity. In other words, it's very clearly shown that it has got an effect on the autonomic nervous system. And yoga also modifies the coronary artery disc. So the coronary artery risk factors, yoga preventive and promotive as a curative potentials. And looking into it, it has got a lovely action on the musculoskeletal system. And scientific studies reveal clearly yoga demonstrates that the yoga improves dexterity and strength and musculoskeletal coordination and practitioners. postures attempt during the yoga practice are mainly isometric exercises, which provide optimally trained, especially maintain stretch to the muscles, and hence the muscle is not wasted. Muscle is not put into strain. The muscle does not cause any fatigue. So, in other words, if to put it in a nutshell, what are the 10 benefits of yoga? When you put it all the one thing together, number one, it improves the posture. Number two, it increases the flexibility. Number three, it builds muscle strength. Number four, it actually increases lower the blood sugar. And number five, it increases the blood flow and keep diseases at bay, increases the self-esteem of an individual, and all the other benefits which we are saying is actually a very useful one with regard to yoga. Now, these are all some of the factors that operate in our yoga, and then how is that it is brought out? What is the proof if you say this is really doing it? So we tried in neurology, we have also done that. But if you really, one of my person got the PhD, the best referable point for yoga, I always say electroencephalogram, that is recording the potentials in the brain. When you start doing the meditation and then the yoga methods, when you combine it, then what happens is our normal, especially the occipital lobe, you get an alpha frequency of 9 to 13 cycles per second. This is akin to the sun frequency. It just coincides with our consciousness. All of us, when our brain frequency comes down below that, and then between 5 and 8, we call that as theta range. The moment the people starts becoming drowsy. When the EEG frequency comes to 4, then they get the deep sleep. But if a person is very good in meditation and yoga, what happens is he retains the consciousness even though the EEG comes to 4. If he really concentrates on meditation and yoga, he can still bring down the frequency of the human brain to 1.5 to 2.5 cycles per second, which we call it as epsilon state. In that state, the autonomic nervous system completely comes under your control. Thereby, you can raise the temperature, you can lower the temperature. You can raise the heart rate, you can lower the heart rate. This has been beautifully done by the Nepalese people in ancient India, where they had a mastery of the yoga and meditation on the EEG concept. Now, in that way, the best way is to prove is to put the iced blanket on the fellow who has done the meditation and yoga. If you put them, it immediately dries. The time taken for him to dry the iced blanket, we call it Tumor's effect. And this Tumor's effect, when he reaches 1.25, he controls the entire autonomic system. Is no longer autonomic. It is only under your consciousness, super consciousness. There are some people like Shirdi Baba and some of them, they have achieved this next state where they stop the EEG activity. They call it as the full really samadhi state. They can come up. It has been reported scientifically that the Baba went for 3 days this state and then came back where the respiration and as well as the heart rate stopped. This is samadhi state, which only a few people attain. Entertaining that link, but what I can just say, this is slightly away from your question, but you must remember, a person who operates in 3 dimensions, that fellow has got the consciousness fixed and the time is variable, and hence yesterday, today, and tomorrow. For all of us, we are all operating in 3 dimensions. If a person is able to really do yoga and meditation, he can get into 4th or 5th dimension. In human being, at least science-wise, they say more than 11 dimensions possible. But in that dimension, the time becomes constant and the consciousness starts fleeting. If I have that state, 4th or the 5th state of, if I look at the person who is still operating in 3 states, I will know his past, the present, and the future. This we call it as Trighyana Jnani in terms of Sanskrit word. In other words, a person who reaches the fourth or the fifth dimension in the human consciousness, he can literally see the past, present, and future because for him, there is no time. One can really lead through the yoga and meditation. This is the highest form where one can reach. And then even the time literally disappears. For him, everything is at that moment. So in terms of statement, I always love to say that each moment is an inspiration till he expires. Thank you.
All right, sir. So as you mentioned quite a few benefits of yoga,
Yeah.
can you tell our audience how does yoga increase brain power?
See, the increase in the brain power is the utility of the oxygen through which it can definitely improve the brain power. Now, people have said that the brain power improves when you start meditating, as we have already said, that it really improves its efficiency and 9 to 13 cycles per second. Alpha is beautifully brought. And of course, the most important point I would rather say that we'll be getting the what we can call that as a power due to the brain. The brain really able to give the frequency at the appropriate time and see that it is not going into either the lower frequency or higher frequency. But one thing that I can say that the power really comes through the yogic method. In terms of the nadis and channels, I told you there are 72,000 nadis, which are all directly related to the brain. And this prana is literally going through the 72 channels to give him the energy. And that energy is really taken up by the whole body, and the energy is utilized by the system, and thereby functional efficiency of the individual is very good. So to put it in one word, I would say that 72,000 nadis which they have obtained through the prana, which is going to be our immediate thinking process or the research lines, they give the energy to the nadis, and the nadis in turn is actually a channel. It's a nadi channel where you can literally play on a positive side with the energy packets and every system in the brain. Brain consists of only, if you look at it, there are 6 hardwares. So these channels operate through this. The main computer frame, as I always call it, as is a programmer. Programmer is only basal ganglia. So he programs well with the energy coming from these nadis. And the next computer, which is the cerebellum, which controls the entire coordination of our body. We give a different name and the coordination results in incoordination. To just give a sample, incoordination of the eye, we doctors call it nystagmus. Incoordination of the speech, we call it dysarthria. Incoordination of the walking, we call it gait ataxia. Incoordination of the limb, we call it dysmetria. All of them, they all come through this nadis power. The third is cerebral cortex, which maintains the highest integrity, which maintains, when you look at it, frontal lobe for thinking, temporal lobe for listening and speaking, parietal lobe for getting all the sensations, and occipital lobe for seeing. So the power needed for this is given by these 72 nadis, and which will work nicely for the effective improvement. The fourth system is autonomic nervous system, which we have already spoken. And the fifth system is the sensory system, which carries all the sensations back to the brain. And the brain is stimulated to give the motor system properly, effectively working. And finally, the most important point, where a man becomes a gentleman and a woman a lady, is through the what we can call it as all the motor system, the sensory system, the autonomic nervous system, they are all joined in limbic system, which is the basis of the human behavior. And that needs power. That means the basic behavior depends on our most important thing is energy to think. I think energy or the vibration lies on our thoughts. And if you look at it, the brain are all equal, whereas the thought that separates us. and the thought, if it is done properly through the meditation, you can achieve greater success in all the anatomical areas of the brain.
Absolutely well said, sir. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for giving us so many information about neurophysiology and yoga. Do you have any message for our audience?
I would just say one, the exercises are meant for the body, yoga for the mind. When the brain and then the body interacts with mind, you get a perfect human being. So to put it in a nutshell, yoga really makes the mind perfectly clear, and then the energy gain makes us to do really Himalayan wonders. Thank you.
Absolutely well said, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good day. I think is over. I think we can